Think you know the whole story behind Lynette Hooker vanishing from her high-end yacht, Soulmate? Think again. Well, prepare to wipe the slate completely clean. A massive
and bone-chilling update just shattered this entire case wide open, all thanks to some brand new lithium marine batteries on board.
Her husband, Brian, swore he spent 9 agonizing hours lost at sea in a busted dinghy while his wife drowned. But federal investigators just pulled the digital records from those batteries. And the evidence they uncovered is enough to freeze your blood. While Brian was allegedly lost at sea, fighting for survival, the yacht's internal digital black box recorded massive power spikes inside the cabin, proving someone was active on board, running high-voltage water pumps for a warm shower and raiding the fridge. Do not look away for even a second, because this digital trail has completely cornered a cold mastermind. And the details we are revealing today are things you absolutely must see to believe. Stick around, because this timeline shifts everything we knew. Federal investigators did not just casually step onto the Soulmate sailboat. They treated the yacht like a floating black box. When the United States Coast Guard Investigative Service officially boarded the 46-foot vessel and wrapped it in yellow crime scene tape at Fort Pierce, they were hunting for more than just physical clues. They were tracking down digital exhaust.
Brian Hooker believed he had pulled off the perfect crime by telling police
that his wife, Lynette, slipped into the pitch-black, turbulent waters of the Bahamas after falling from their small raft. He posed as a grieving retired Marine who battled the fierce winds and currents, drifting aimlessly for 9 long hours with nothing but a single oar, before miraculously washing ashore at Marsh Harbor. It was a gut-wrenching, tragic tale that almost worked. But hard science and digital footprints do not lie. Weather data recovered from that exact night over the Sea of Abaco revealed the first major crack in Brian's alibi. While Brian insisted the weather was an absolute nightmare of violent currents and blinding rain that stopped him from saving his wife, nearby radar systems showed the sea was as calm as glass. Even worse for Brian, a highly localized storm. Intense storm cells swept directly over the area where he claimed he was floating for hours in an open boat. Yet, when rescuers found him, Brian was bone dry. And during his hours of oversharing tiny, useless details with first responders, he never once mentioned getting hit by a single drop of rain. How does someone float right through a heavy downpour in an 8-foot open dinghy and remain completely dry? The answer is simple and deeply chilling. He was never out there drifting. Local witnesses anchored just 100 yards away at Aunt Pat's Bay shattered his timeline at around 9:30 p.m. long after the usual island noise had faded into total silence. A massive, unmistakable splash echoed across the quiet harbor. Those witnesses knew the bay very well. They had spotted the Soulmate earlier, easily identifying it as a live-aboard boat because it was heavily packed, with solar panels, paddleboards, and heavy gears strapped to the deck. Investigators tracked that sound straight to the coordinates, where Brian's luxury sailboat sat anchored. This single sound completely flips their whole story. If Lynette supposedly went missing miles away during a chaotic transit from the Abaco Inn, why did a massive, heavy splash come straight from their stationary boat at 9:30 p.m.? Brian claimed he was already stranded at sea by then. But the physical evidence tells a completely different story. Someone was on that boat in the dark, dropping heavy objects into the ocean. The trap was already starting to close around Brian. But he had no idea his own electronics were about to become his worst enemy. The digital trail did not just stop with weather reports. Brian Hooker prided himself on being a high-tech expert, and family members revealed he constantly geeked out by networking the entire yacht with advanced software and security apps. He felt entirely safe behind his digital screen, completely unaware he was actively building his own prison. That 46-foot sailboat was absolutely crawling with cameras. One camera sat at the front of the covered pilot house, looking toward the back of the vessel. Another was mounted high on the mast, mapping navigational routes, while a distinct blink security system was mounted at the stern, facing forward. This particular blink camera captured every single movement inside the cockpit, but it also casts a direct line of sight straight down into the lower living quarters below deck. When federal investigators started scraping data from these devices, they realized Brian's phone and watch automatically triggered handshakes with the ship's onboard Starlink satellite internet router. Based on Brian's official timeline, he was miles away, drifting helplessly in the open ocean. But those router logs tell a completely different, chilling story. This digital footprint proves his devices were actively pinging the vessel's network deep into the night, placing him squarely inside the covered pilot house while he claimed to be fighting for survival on the water. But the biggest breakthrough came from a hidden black box Brian completely overlooked: the vessel's newly replaced marine lithium-ion batteries. Since the Soulmate had recently suffered a massive lightning strike, the entire power grid was brand new, equipped with an advanced internal storage log tracking every single milliamp of electricity drawn. When forensic investigators pulled these power logs, the data sent shockwaves straight through the department. At the very hour Brian claimed he was shivering in an open dinghy, the lithium batteries recorded a sudden, massive spike in voltage. It was the exact electrical signature needed to trigger the vessel's high-pressure marine water pumps and interior lights. Someone was on board that dark,
Quiet sailboat, washing the salt water off their skin with a hot shower and opening the refrigerator door.
This digital trail proved the boat was fully alive and the walls were rapidly closing in on him. This was not Brian Hooker's first time trying to erase his physical coordinates. Public employment records recently dug up by investigators expose a dark, hidden pattern in the husband's past.
Long before he ever set sail on the Soulmate,
Brian was fired out of the blue from AT&T for a deeply disturbing and specific reason. Investigators caught him red-handed, illegally tampering with the GPS tracking software on his company work van to hide where he was going. He believed he was like a ghost, easily outsmarting any electronic tracking system. Now, that old behavior stands as the most damning evidence of his criminal intent. The moment search and rescue teams first started questioning him down in the Bahamas, Brian's act cracked, shifting from grieving husband to a desperate fugitive. He swore to local police and his wife's devastated family that he would absolutely never leave the island until they found his beautiful wife. Yet within 48 hours, he packed up, entirely cutting off his own stepdaughter, Carly, a girl he had raised since she was just 3, and boarded a midnight flight to Nassau before slipping back into the United States. In the world of crime, this isn't just suspicious behavior, it is legally seen as a direct admission of guilt. But the evidence Brian left behind on that yacht is what might finally destroy him. Detectives are now carefully looking at the physical items missing from the vessel's inventory, focusing very closely on Lynette's daily exercise routine. Lynette was deeply committed to fitness, regularly using heavy metal dumbbells right on deck to stay in shape. Today, those heavy weights are nowhere to be found on the boat. And even more disturbing, barely 48 hours before her disappearance, Lynette shared a quick online update showing them refilling their heavy scuba diving tanks at Guana Cay. But when the Coast Guard finally seized the vessel, they discovered his diving tanks were nearly empty, while hers were still completely full. Forensic experts are now investigating a truly terrifying theory. They believe Brian did more than just use his old AT&T tricks to hide his location. They suspect he used those heavy diving weight belts and the missing gym dumbbells to make absolutely sure his wife's body would never float to the surface.